welcome back to our news bulletin. Iran has warned U.S. President Donald Trump against taking dangerous actions after American forces launched airstrikes in Iraq. In a statement, Foreign Ministry spokesperson Abbas Mousavi said Trump should reconsider the presence of troops in the area. The statement said the storage facilities include camps housing weapons used to target U.S. and coalition troops. It said the strikes were defensive, proportional, and a direct response to the threat posed by Kataib Hezbollah. Earlier, the Pentagon said it targeted 5 weapons facilities of the Kataib Hezbollah armed faction in operations across Iraq. U.S. Secretary of Defense Mark Esper said Washington will not tolerate attacks against its interests and allies. 2 Americans and a Briton were killed in a rocket attack on the Taji Air Base in Iraq. Moving towards Afghanistan, the Taliban have called on foreign nations not to make comments about the future administrative structure of Afghanistan. In a statement, the Taliban said the remarks by international community on Kabul's internal matters violate the Doha Agreement. It said the Afghans will chart a course for their future in a free atmosphere. The statement comes after head of the U.S. Military Central Command, General Kenneth McKenzie, said the Taliban's current actions are unhelpful for intra-Afghan talks. Russia says Israeli attacks on Syrian territory have increased tensions in the region. Speaking to media, Foreign Ministry spokesperson Maria Zakharova said Moscow is concerned over Israel's continued airstrikes. Zakharova said the Israeli practice of delivering unilateral airstrikes violate the sovereignty of neighboring Arab nations. She said that such arbitrary actions undermine regional stability. In a relevant context, Zakharova said consultations are being held between Russian and Turkish defense ministries to guarantee implementation of ceasefire deal. Syria has been struggling with a civil war between President Bashar al-Assad's government and rebels since 2011. The EU says it will pay €2,000 each to migrants in camps on Greek islands who are willing to return to their home countries. EU Home Minister's Affairs Commissioner Ylva Johansson announced the scheme in Athens. Johansson said the temporary offer is open for 1 month. Johansson said the scheme is open to people who arrived at the border before January 1st. At the border itself, Greek forces have used tear gas and water cannon to deter migrants from trying to cross into Europe. Greece says it has stopped 45,000 people from entering the country in the past 2 weeks. Tens of thousands of refugees have been trying to get into Greece since Turkey opened its side of the border. The war in Syria has almost entered its 10th year. Damascus residents say they are lucky there's less violence around their city today, but the trauma from past battles lingers on. More in this report.
The conflict grew out of popular protests against the regime of Bashar al-Assad in 2011. It then morphed into a violent insurgency and civil war after the government responded with crushing force. Since then, over 511,000 people have been killed. Some measure of calm has been restored in the capital Damascus after years of fighting. However, residents say they're still struggling to rebuild their lives.
How can I forget the war? Even after 10 years, I can't forget it. The war took the people dearest to my heart. It took my only son, Mazin, and it took my left arm from my body and left me with a permanent fracture in my leg. It took my house and my car.
There are others who have suffered even more gruesome injuries. One displaced resident living in a refugee camp near the border with Turkey has lost both his eyes and legs. Ibrahim Al-Ali's body is like a map of his miraculous but horrific journey through the bombing campaigns of northwestern Syria.
I was on my way back from work and was wounded by a landmine. That was the last day I saw the world. The landmine led, as you see, to my right leg being cut at the knee and my left leg also at the knee. And I lost my right eye completely and my left eye completely.
Most Syrians simply wish for a home they can call their own, where they won't have to worry about evictions or bombs from the sky.
أولادي تشردوا.
I hope to have a home that no one can make me leave. Whether awake or asleep, I'm dreaming about this because I'm tired of being displaced.
على العيشة هاي عيشة.
There are around 5.6 million Syrian refugees around the world, with an additional 6.2 million displaced inside the country. Much of the fighting is now restricted to the country's northwest, in and around Idlib province.
More from the Middle East. The African Union has called on Libya's warring sides to immediately open talks on a political solution to the civil war. The call was made after 3 African heads of state, the African Union chief, and a senior UN envoy met in the Republic of Congo. It is their second meeting since the Berlin summit in January. In the German capital, leaders agreed to end foreign interference and impose an arms embargo on Libya. Tripoli's government of national accord has been battling Eastern commander Khalifa Haftar since the fall of dictator Muammar Gaddafi in 2011. International efforts to end the conflict have stumbled, and Libya's African neighbors have been seeking a wider role in solving the country's crisis.
The contact group reiterates its strong condemnation of the violations, interference with the arms presence, dispatch and use of external fighters on Libyan territory.
La présence, l'envoi et l'utilisation des combattants extérieurs.
The African Union Contact Group has decided to hold the National Inter-Libyan Conference in July in Ethiopia's Addis Ababa. Now, as the coronavirus outbreak exacerbates worldwide, China has reported single-digit new deaths and confirmed cases for the first time since the novel coronavirus outbreak began. The National Health Commission says 7 people lost their lives and 8 more were infected in the last 24 hours. As the epidemic appears to slow down, local governments have been ordered to revive their economies. Tech giant Apple has reopened all 42 of its branded stores in China. The country's industry minister, Jin Yuabin, said outside Hubei province, 95% of large firms and business have returned to work. The number of people who have died from COVID-19 in the country currently stands at 3,176, with 80,813 confirmed cases. The World Health Organization says the global community should work together to fight the new coronavirus rather than blaming each other. This comes as the COVID-19 outbreak continues to spread worldwide, claiming thousands of lives.
After the WHO officially declared the outbreak as a pandemic, spokesperson Tarek Jasarevic said every country should take early containment measures. He said basic public health actions including epidemic surveillance have proven effective in stopping the transmission chain. The spokesperson said the responsibility to contain the pandemic falls on everyone, not only on health workers.
We have seen what countries like China, South Korea, or Singapore have done, and they have done very strong basic public health actions in terms of epidemiological surveillance, and that's basically finding people who are infected, testing them, treating them, looking for their close contacts, and trying really in that way to slow down or to interrupt the transmission chain.
Meanwhile, South Korea, once the largest coronavirus outbreak outside China, saw its newly recovered patients exceed fresh infections for the first time. The Korea Centers for Disease Control and Prevention confirmed 110 new cases, but 177 fully recovered patients were released the same day, while India has reported its first death from the novel coronavirus.
However, China says the US Army may have brought the new coronavirus disease to Wuhan, the epicenter of the virus, while Iran's Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei also implied the outbreak can be part of a biological attack by the US. In a tweet, Chinese Ministry of Foreign Affairs spokesperson Li Jianzhao said, Washington owes Beijing an explanation. The statement comes after US President Donald Trump, in his address, called COVID-19 a foreign virus that started in China. US Secretary of State Mike Pompeo also referred to the coronavirus as the Wuhan virus. Meanwhile, Khamenei in a statement called on Iran's armed forces to help the government fight against the disease. He said the measure could also be a form of biological defense drill. US President Donald Trump says he could not consult the EU before announcing the coronavirus travel ban because of a lack of time. His remarks follow EU criticism of the unilateral decision to restrict travel from Europe. Trump said it was possible the US might extend the travel ban on Europe beyond the current 30 days. He added he could also shorten the restrictions. Trump said he excluded the UK from the curbs because it was doing a good job in tackling the coronavirus. The president said he is not yet ready to invoke emergency disaster powers. After Trump's announcement, U.S. stocks crashed, with the Dow Jones facing its worst day since 1987. The EU has criticized US President Donald Trump's decision to restrict travel from Europe over the coronavirus. In a statement, EU Commission President Ursula von der Leyen and Council President Charles Michel said the decision was taken without consultation. The statement said the coronavirus is a global crisis and it requires cooperation rather than unilateral action. It added, the EU is taking strong action to limit the spread of the virus. Earlier, Trump imposed sweeping restrictions on travel from Europe for 30 days, hitting airlines and heightening global alarm. The move sent markets into a tailspin, with European shares plunging to their lowest in almost 4 years and oil also slumping. It also sent stressed travelers rushing to airports to board last flights back to the US. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has called for an immediate formation of a unity government to tackle the coronavirus pandemic. In an address, Netanyahu said he is asking for an emergency national government for a limited time. He said it was necessary to form a government to save the lives of citizens. Netanyahu's opponent, Benny Gantz, said he was willing to discuss the proposal. He said such a government should include representatives from all parties in the parliament. The ruling Likud party and rivals Blue and White party failed to secure a majority in March 2nd elections. We have a lot more coming up right after this short break, so stay tuned. Welcome back. The US says it has imposed sanctions on a subsidiary of Russian oil giant Rosneft to pressurize the Venezuelan government. The action is a part of increasing competition between the US and Russia over the South American country. The Treasury Department says it has sanctioned TNK Trading National, which brokers the sale and transport of Venezuelan crude oil. It blacklisted Rosneft Trading SA, also a Rosneft subsidiary, and its president Didier Casimiro last month. The Treasury has also issued a general license allowing companies to wind down their transactions with RTSA or TTI before May 20th. Switzerland-based trading company TTI and RTSA handled a large percentage of Venezuelan oil exports last year. New Zealand Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern says her country still has to do much more to end white super racism and racism. Ardern's remarks come ahead of the first anniversary of the Christchurch mosque attacks that killed 51 people last year. Ardern said New Zealand has fundamentally changed after the massacre at 2 mosques. In a news conference, she said the country needs to continue challenging the growing threat from far-right groups.
A year on, I believe New Zealand and its people have fundamentally changed. I can't see how you could have an event like this and not. But the challenge for us will be ensuring that in our everyday actions, in every opportunity where we see bullying, harassment, racism, discrimination, calling it out as a nation.
Ardern has been praised globally for her decisive response to the mass shooting when her government outlawed assault rifles. Moving towards Paris, which votes in the first round of its mayoral elections on Sunday. The city mayor's office is the country's most high-profile local government job. This time, all 3 candidates are women, which will keep the job in female hands. More in this report.
Months ago, the Paris mayor's office seemed to be within the grasp of President Emmanuel Macron's party. But LREM candidate Benjamin Grevoux's campaign collapsed after a sick scandal involving him emerged in the news. Since then, he's been replaced by Health Minister Agnes Buzyn as party's candidate.
I'm campaigning focusing on the first round of the election, and my aim is to come first in every district. My goal now is to really talk to the women and men of Paris about my program, which is thorough, which addresses their needs, and to show them what my vision of Paris in the 21st century is.
Buzyn is campaigning on a centrist pitch, but has struggled to close the gap with her rivals on the right and the left. The current frontrunner is incumbent mayor Anne Hidalgo from the Socialist Party.
I am active on ecological issues because I realized quickly, first of all as a teenager, but then when I was a councillor before I even became mayor, the impact we have on our environment and the danger we expose living creatures and our own children to.
Then there's Conservative candidate Rachida Dati, who was a justice minister under former President Nicolas Sarkozy. Her ratings have climbed unexpectedly in recent days, with some polls indicated she could win Sunday's polls.
We are still here, more of us than ever, more determined than ever, propelled by a tide which is rising higher every day. They weren't expecting us, they didn't see our forces grow.
All three candidates' campaigns are focused on climate issues, cleanliness, and crime. The elections come at a time when coronavirus fears are rising in Europe. As such, the voter turnout could be low.
The U.S. Defense Department says it wants to reevaluate its decision to award a cloud contract to Microsoft. Last October, Microsoft won a $10 billion contract to build a cloud network for the U.S. military. Rival data services provider Amazon filed a lawsuit in the U.S. Court of Federal Claims contesting the decision, arguing it was politically motivated. The retailer claimed President Donald Trump's personal dislike of Amazon CEO Jeff Bezos influenced the decision. Last month, a U.S. judge issued an order at Amazon's request, temporarily blocking the U.S. military from starting work on the project. The judge said Amazon stood a substantial chance of succeeding in its protest on its merits. Government lawyers have asked the court to send the matter back to the Pentagon for reconsideration. In Turkey, the ancient town of Hasankeyf, which has stood on the banks of the river Tigris for 12,000 years, is slowly drowning every day. The town, widely seen as a jewel of human history, will soon be a victim of the Iliusu Dam project. Details in this report.
Hasankeyf is a city under threat. This 12,000-year-old settlement in eastern Turkey is sinking under the waters of the Tigris River, rising ever higher as a result of a controversial dam project. Its residents are trying to salvage what they can as they question what future commercial opportunities will remain.
I used to work in the tourism industry. I sold pamphlets. I told the story of this place. But unfortunately, in the last few months, no one has come here except journalists.
Some locals try to focus on the benefits the dam will bring to other parts of the region's economy, which they feel has been neglected by the Turkish government in the past.
Above all, it's good for the energy sector and for power generation. But it will also be useful and beneficial for agriculture.
The Ilisu hydroelectric dam is destined to become the second largest in the country, a huge project that has displaced many into the new Hasankeyf. For the project's critics, the dam will not only swallow up a historic city, but also erase part of the identity of this Kurdish majority region.
When you look at the landscape, it's a clear destruction of history that we're witnessing. Did Turkey really need that dam? We keep asking that question.
With the canyon encased in concrete and water engulfing this historical landmark a little more every day, many wonder what Hasankeyf will look like tomorrow.
European markets are trading higher as regional stocks attempts to rally after the worst sell-off in history. The coronavirus pandemic is continuing to dominate investor sentiment with mounting fears of a global recession. London's FTSE 100 has gained over 1%, while the CAC 40 in Paris is trading nearly 1% higher. Frankfurt's DAX has gained over 0.5%, while tech giant Wirecard jumped over 9%. In Asia, stocks crashed following a panic sell-off at Wall Street, with U.S. markets recording their biggest one-day decline since Black Monday in 1987. The Nikkei 225 led the losses, closing over 6% lower after crashing in early trading. Seoul's Kospi, the Shanghai Composite, and Hong Kong's Hang Seng also lost ground. On the oil markets, international Brent crude has surged over 2.5%, with a price war still to rattling oil market. The European Central Bank says the euro area GDP growth is projected to fall to less than 1% from its previous forecasts for 2020 over the coronavirus pandemic. The bank's president, Christine Lagarde, says projections suggest muted growth in the first half of the year, followed by improvement in the second. The ECB has kept its key interest rates unchanged while announcing new stimulus to back the Eurozone financial system against COVID-19. Refinancing and interest rates on marginal lending and deposits have been kept at 0%, 0.25%, and negative 0.5%. In the meantime, EU manufacturing output slipped 1.5% in January from the same month last year. Eurostat says the calendar-adjusted industrial production index fell to 102 points in January 2020.
The latest indicators suggest a considerable worsening of the near-term growth outlook. The disruption of supply chains is impeding production plans in the manufacturing sector, while necessary containment measures against the further spread of the coronavirus are adversely affecting economic activity.
Cryptocurrencies have lost $93.5 billion in the last 24 hours following the global stock sell-off. Industry-side CoinDesk says major cryptocurrency Bitcoin dropped by 48%. In the past few years, Bitcoin has been seen as digital gold and become something of a safe haven asset in which to park money. But after losing most of its gains for the year, it has now been labeled as risky an asset as equity. Other cryptocurrencies have followed suit, with Ethereum tanking 49%. Now let's look at the weather from around the globe. This is all for now. For the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at indus.news.